Captain Sarah Chen rubbed her temples as she stared at the mining survey readings scrolling across her console. The Helios had been mapping this sector for 3 weeks, and they'd found nothing but worthless rocks and ice. Standard procedure dictated another week of surveys before they could justify returning to port, but she was already drafting the report in her head. Sector GT 779. No commercially viable mineral deposits detected. The soft chime of the proximity alert drew her attention back to the present. Contact at 7 million kilometers, bearing 035, reported Navigator Wong from his station. Profile matches a Skthar trading vessel. Hail them, Chen ordered, grateful for any break in the monotony. Maybe they can tell us if we're wasting our time out here. Captain, Wong's voice cracked. Second contact. Much larger. It's crystalline. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The crystalline hunters. The stuff of spacers' nightmares. No one knew their real name because no one had ever survived direct contact to ask. Battle stations. Chen ordered, her mouth dry. Sound general quarters. Helm, plot us an escape vector. But before they could act, space itself seemed to fracture. A massive form emerged from the void. Angular, translucent, and utterly alien. The creature's crystalline body refracted the starlight into prismatic patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't so terrifying. It was easily 20 times the size of the Helios. More shapes emerged behind it. 3, then 7, then 12 crystal hunters in total. Their formation was precise, deliberate, hunting. The Skthar ship is attempting to flee, Wong reported, his voice barely a whisper. Chen watched in helpless horror as the crystal hunters surrounded the alien vessel. Their attack was methodical, coordinated. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from their crystalline forms, cutting through the Skthar ship's shields like they weren't even there. The trading vessel's engines flared as it tried to escape, but the outcome was inevitable. Captain, First Officer Rivera spoke softly beside her. Shouldn't they have noticed us by now? Chen blinked, realizing he was right. The Helios was well within the crystal hunters' known detection range, but the creatures were completely focused on their prey. As she watched, one of the massive beings actually altered its course to avoid passing too close to the human vessel. The Skthar ship's distress beacon activated, broadcasting on all frequencies. Please, anyone. We require immediate assistance. We have civilians aboard. Children, please. Chen gripped her armrests, knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her to help, but she knew their weapons would be useless against the crystal hunters. She'd be sending her crew to die for nothing. The slaughter was swift. The Skthar ship broke apart under the sustained assault, atmosphere venting into space in crystallizing plumes. The hunters moved through the debris with terrible purpose, systematically destroying every escape pod they detected. And still, they ignored the Helios. When it was over, the crystal hunters gathered the larger pieces of wreckage into a tight cluster. Their bodies pulsed with internal light, and the debris began to break down at the molecular level. Within minutes, there was nothing left to mark the Skthar ship's passing. The hunters turned as one and vanished back into the fractures in space they'd emerged from, leaving the Helios untouched in the suddenly empty sector. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Finally, Rivera broke the silence. What just happened? Why didn't they attack us? Chen stared at the space where the Skthar ship had been destroyed. Send a priority message to Fleet Command. Attach all sensor logs. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Tell them we've just witnessed the crystal hunters in action, and we've confirmed what the rumors have been suggesting. For some reason, they're deliberately avoiding human contact. She looked around at her shaken crew. And tell them we need xenobiologists out here immediately. We need to understand why the galaxy's apex predators are treating us like we're invisible, or why they're treating us like something they're afraid of. Marina Torres had been staring at the same quantum resonance patterns for 16 hours straight, and they still made no sense. The lab around her was littered with empty coffee cups and discarded data tablets, physical manifestations of 3 weeks of mounting frustration. "Run it again," she ordered the lab's AI. "Compare human consciousness patterns against all known sapient species, including the Nuzkthar data we recovered from the Helios incident." The holographic display flickered to life, showing waves of neural activity from 24 different species. Each alien mind produced its own unique signature, but they all followed recognizable patterns, predictable oscillations that rippled through quantum space like stones dropped in a pond. All except the human patterns. Where other species showed ordered waves, human consciousness appeared as a chaotic maelstrom. The neural activity twisted and writhed, never repeating, never settling into any recognizable pattern. It was like comparing a symphony to a tornado. Dr. Torres, her assistant, Raj, appeared in the doorway. The Nexrathi hunting footage from the Centauri sector just came in. She gestured for him to transfer it to her display. The recording showed 3 crystalline hunters pursuing a Valaxian survey ship. Their movements were precise, calculated, each hunter positioning itself to herd their prey into an optimal killing zone. "Now overlay the quantum consciousness detection data," she ordered. The display changed, showing how the Nexrathi tracked their prey through quantum space. The Valaxian crew's mind patterns blazed like beacons, making them easy targets for the hunter's sensory organs. "Now show me the incident from last week, the one with the human mining vessel that strayed into their hunting grounds." The footage shifted. The lone Nexrathi hunter, passing within kilometers of a human ship. But instead of attacking, the creature altered course sharply, its crystalline form actually fragmenting slightly in its haste to move away. "It's not just ignoring us," Marina muttered, leaning closer to the display. "It's terrified of us. Look at the structural integrity loss in its outer layers. That's a panic response." She pulled up the quantum data from that encounter, comparing it to hundreds of other recorded interactions. Every time a human ship came near, the Nexrathi consciousness patterns showed clear signs of fear. "Cross-reference with evolutionary records," she ordered. "Show me any Earth species that developed similar consciousness patterns." "No matches found," the AI replied. "Expand search. Include extinct species, theoretical models, and," she hesitated, "and include the shadow predator fragments from the archival databases." The room dimmed as new data flooded the displays. Patterns from Earth's evolutionary history streamed past, billions of years of life developing increasingly complex consciousness. Then came the theoretical models, attempts to map how intelligence might evolve under different conditions. Finally, the shadow predator data appeared. These fragments, recovered from the ruins of long-dead civilizations, had baffled synorchaeologists for centuries. They seemed to describe creatures that hunted through dimensional barriers, beings that could never be detected until it was too late. Marina's hands shook as she overlaid the patterns. The shadow predator consciousness signatures aligned perfectly with human neural activity. Not similar, identical. "That's impossible," Raj whispered. "Those records are millions of years old. They're from the other side of the galaxy." Marina stared at the proof floating before her. The most feared predators in known space were terrified of humans because human consciousness matched the pattern of something that used to hunt them. She reached for her communicator, then stopped. No, this wasn't something to be shared over a casual call. This revelation would shake the foundations of human history, of humanity's place in the galaxy. "Raj," she said quietly, "book me on the next transport to Earth. And send a priority message to the Xenobiological Council. Tell them." She took a deep breath. "Tell them we found out why the Nexrathi avoid humans, and they're going to want to hear this in person." As she began gathering her data for the presentation, a new thought struck her. If humans shared the same consciousness patterns as these ancient shadow predators, what else might they have inherited? And what would happen when humanity finally discovered its true potential? The Xenobiological Council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from 12 species crowded the circular room, their attention fixed on the holographic display at its center. Marina Torres stood beside it, acutely aware that she was the only human present. As you can see, she gestured to the swirling patterns above the projector. Human consciousness doesn't follow any recognizable rules of quantum resonance. While your species' patterns show clear, predictable oscillations, ours, she tapped her tablet, bringing up a new visualization. Ours looks like this. The assembled aliens recoiled as one. Where the previous patterns had been orderly and comprehensible, the human consciousness pattern writhed like a living thing, its edges bleeding into impossible geometries. These patterns match exactly with the shadow predator signatures found in the ancient archives, Marina continued. But here's where it gets interesting. The effect isn't limited to humans. It's present in all Earth-based life forms, just at different levels of complexity. The Valaxian representative, their crystalline skin glinting under the chamber lights, raised an appendage. You're suggesting your entire planet's evolutionary tree developed these consciousness patterns. That's unprecedented. More than unprecedented, Marina replied. It should be impossible. Complex quantum signatures like these don't evolve naturally. They're always the result of extreme evolutionary pressure. She paused, letting the implication sink in. Something was hunting Earth's life forms. Something so terrible that it forced our entire biosphere to develop consciousness patterns that could hide from quantum detection. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Scathar representative's throat sacs pulsed with anxiety. But the shadow predator patterns are identical to ours. Yes, Marina nodded, which led us down the wrong path initially. We thought we were seeing evidence of descent, that humans might be related to these ancient hunters. But when we examined the quantum signatures more closely, we found something else. She brought up a new display, showing a time-lapse of Earth's evolutionary history. The patterns didn't appear suddenly, like you'd expect if we were descended from the shadow predators. They evolved gradually, becoming more complex over millions of years. It wasn't inheritance, it was convergent evolution. The chamber erupted in shocked discussions. Marina waited for the noise to die down before continuing. We're not the shadows. We're what evolved to hide from them. Or, she took a deep breath, to hide from something that hunted like them. The Nexrathi representative, attending via hologram due to their species' instinctive fear of humans, spoke for the first time. Their crystalline form vibrated with tension. The ancient archives speak of the shadow predators hunting through dimensional barriers. No physical defenses could stop them. The only survivors were those they couldn't detect. Exactly, Marina said. And what better way to hide from a quantum consciousness hunter than to evolve a consciousness pattern so chaotic it appears as a void? Earth's life forms didn't develop better armor or weapons. They developed better camouflage. The ultimate stealth technology, written into our very neurons. She brought up one final display. A recording from the Helios incident. The assembled aliens watched as the Nexrathi hunters deliberately avoided the human ship while destroying the Scathar vessel. Your species recognizes our consciousness pattern through genetic memory. You don't avoid us because we're predators. You avoid us because your ancestors learned that anything with our pattern is impossible to hunt. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't descended from ancient cosmic horrors. They had evolved to survive them. Every human thought pattern was the product of an evolutionary arms race that had turned Earth's life forms into quantum ghosts. The Valaxian representative spoke again, their voice trembling slightly. If this is true, what happened to the original hunters? The ones that forced your evolution? Marina stared at the swirling pattern of her own consciousness, still flowing above the projector. That's what we're trying to figure out, because whatever they were terrible enough to remake an entire planet's evolutionary trajectory. And somewhere out there, in the darkness between stars, they might still be hunting. The ancient ruins on Proxima weren't meant to be a tomb. Marina Torres stood in what had once been a vast library, her helmet lights illuminating walls covered in crystalline data storage that had waited millions of years to be read. The dust beneath her feet had once been living beings, researchers who died trying to preserve their knowledge. "Over here," Raj called from across the chamber. "I found another intact data crystal." Marina made her way carefully across the room, trying not to disturb the layers of history beneath her boots. The crystal Raj had found was larger than the others, its structure more complex. As she held her scanner over it, the readings made her breath catch. "This one's different," she said, connecting her tablet to the scanner. "The data density is incredible. It's not just text. There are quantum recordings stored in here." The crystal began to glow as their equipment interfaced with it. Holographic images flickered to life around them, filling the ancient chamber with ghostly light. They showed scenes from millions of years ago, when this facility was alive with researchers of a dozen different species. They were working together, Raj observed, watching the silent figures move through their space. All these different species, unified by something. By fear, Marina finished. The recordings shifted, showing new images that made them both step back. Vast crystalline forms moved through space. Ancient Nexrethi, far larger than their modern descendants. But they weren't hunting. They were fleeing. The next sequence showed why. Spaces between stars seemed to twist, to fold in on themselves. Things emerged from these distortions, things that defied description. They moved like living shadows, their forms constantly shifting, their presence detectable only by the void they left in the quantum field. "The shadow predators," Raj whispered. "This is actual footage of them." Marina adjusted her scanner, focusing on the quantum signatures recorded in the crystal. The patterns were hauntingly familiar, the same chaos, the same impossible geometries they'd seen in human consciousness readings. But something wasn't right. "Look at the timestamps," she said, pointing to the data scrolling across her tablet. "These recordings, they're not from when we thought. They're much older, by millions of years." She interfaced with another crystal, then another, building the timeline from the fragmented data. The shadow predators hadn't appeared suddenly across the galaxy. They'd followed a pattern, moving from system to system, sector to sector. They were migrating, she realized. No, they were being driven, running from something. The final crystal contained the oldest recordings. The images it showed made Marina's scientific detachment crumble. An entire sector of space, thousands of light years across, twisted and distorted by something vast. Something that hunted even the shadow predators. "That's impossible," Raj said, his voice shaking. "The scale. Nothing could be that big. Nothing could affect space-time at that level." But the evidence was right in front of them. The shadow predators, the galaxy's most feared hunters, had been prey themselves. They'd fled across the galaxy, hunting lesser species to survive, always staying ahead of something worse. Marina's hands trembled as she accessed the facility's last records. The final entry was a warning, written in the desperate hours before the end. "They flee toward the galactic rim. The great hunter follows. Any species in their path must adapt or die. We cannot stop them. We can only preserve this warning. When you see the shadows coming, you are not seeing the true predator. You are seeing its prey." The crystals went dark, their ancient power finally exhausted. In the renewed darkness, Marina's tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from Earth, new genetic analysis results she'd requested weeks ago. As she read the data, the final pieces fell into place. The chaotic patterns in human consciousness weren't copied from the shadow predators. They were what happened when evolution had millions of years to perfect the art of hiding from them. "Raj," she said quietly, "we need to get back to Earth. Now, because I don't think humanity just evolved to hide from the shadow predators. I think we evolved to hide from what was hunting them. And somewhere out there, it might still be hungry." The emergency session of the Galactic Council wasn't going well. Marina watched from her seat as representatives from 30 species argued about humanity's true nature. The chamber, usually a model of diplomatic restraint, had devolved into barely controlled chaos. They must be contained. The Valaxian delegate's crystalline form vibrated with emotion. If humans carry the shadow predator gene. We've been over this, Marina interrupted, her patience wearing thin. Our latest genetic analysis proves we don't share any DNA with the shadow predators. What we share is a solution. She brought up the holographic display, showing the evolutionary timeline she'd reconstructed from Earth's fossil record and the ancient archive data. Look at the progression. Early Earth life showed normal quantum signatures, readable and detectable. Then, around the same time the shadow predators entered our sector of space, everything changed. The display showed a rapid series of mutations spreading through Earth's biosphere. Species after species developed increasingly complex consciousness patterns, each generation more chaotic than the last. This isn't the signature of genetic inheritance, she explained. It's convergent evolution on a planetary scale. Every surviving species on Earth developed the same adaptation, consciousness patterns that appear as quantum voids. The Scathar representative's throat sacs pulsed skeptically. No ecosystem could survive such rapid change. The predator-prey relationships alone would have collapsed, Marina nodded, unless the threat was so severe that it forced cooperation. Look at these patterns from Earth's Cambrian period. New data filled the display, showing ancient marine creatures with wildly different physical forms, but identical quantum signatures. Predator and prey species developed the same consciousness patterns simultaneously. They weren't hiding from each other anymore. They were hiding from something worse. The chamber grew quiet as the implications sank in. Marina continued, the shadow predators weren't the apex hunters we thought they were. They were running from something so terrible that it could reshape space-time itself. When they passed through Earth's sector, our ancestors had two choices: evolve perfect quantum camouflage or die. She brought up the final piece of evidence, a comparison between human consciousness patterns and the quantum distortions recorded in the ancient archives. We didn't evolve to hide from the shadow predators. We evolved to hide from what was hunting them. And we got so good at it that even the Nexrathi, the galaxy's current apex predators, instinctively avoid us. But why? The Nexrathi delegate's hologram flickered with agitation. Why did your planet succeed where others failed? Marina smiled grimly. Time. The shadow predators passed through dozens of sectors, but they lingered in ours. Something about Earth's system kept them there longer, giving our ancestors more generations to adapt. By the time the Great Hunter arrived, Earth's biosphere had evolved the perfect defense. Consciousness patterns so chaotic, they appeared as voids in quantum space. New alerts flashed across the chamber's displays. Reports were coming in from the galactic rim. Strange distortions in space-time, eerily similar to the ancient recordings. That's why I called this session, Marina said quietly. We thought we were studying history, but we're not. The patterns are repeating. The shadow predators are moving again, which means the Great Hunter returns, whispered the Valaxian delegate. Marina nodded. And this time, we might be ready. Humanity doesn't carry some ancient predator gene. We're the species that evolved the ultimate defense. Our consciousness patterns don't just hide us from hunters. They make us invisible to the most powerful predator the galaxy has ever known. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensory organs of each delegate. We're not the monsters you feared we were. We're the ones who figured out how to survive them. And if the Great Hunter is returning, you're going to need our help to survive what comes next. The chamber erupted in urgent discussions. As the delegates debated humanity's role in the coming crisis, Marina's tablet chimed with a priority message from Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Network. She read it once, then again, her hands growing cold despite the chamber's warmth. The void between stars was beginning to twist. The emergency alert pierced through Marina's fitful sleep at 300 hours Earth Standard Time. The Nexrathi were attacking. Not just random raids, but a coordinated assault against 3 human colonies simultaneously. Her tablet displayed the casualty reports from New Montana, a terraform-in-progress world housing 50,000 colonists. "This makes no sense," she muttered, rushing through the Xenobiology Institute's corridors. "Their genetic programming should prevent this. The fear response is hardwired into their species." The crisis center was already packed when she arrived. Holographic displays showed the attacks in real time. The Nexrathi movements were erratic, desperate, nothing like their usual precise hunting patterns. Dr. Torres, General Chen, the same captain who'd first documented the Nexrathi's avoidance of humans, now commanded Earth's defense force. "We need answers. Why are they attacking now?" Marina studied the tactical displays, noting the chaotic formation of the crystalline hunters. "Look at their behavior. This isn't predation. It's desperation. They're terrified, but they're attacking anyway." New data streamed in. The Nexrathi fleet attacking New Montana had lost 3 hunters trying to breach the colony's minimal defenses. Their formations were breaking down, individual hunters seemingly fighting their own instincts. "Quantum scans from the outer colonies," a technician called out. "The void. It's expanding. The distortions are getting stronger." Marina's blood ran cold. The displays showed it clearly now. Vast sections of space twisting in impossible ways, driving everything before them. The shadow predators were fleeing in greater numbers than ever recorded. "They're running out of space," she realized. "The Great Hunter's approach is forcing them into our territory. They're not attacking us because they want to. They're attacking because they have nowhere else to go." A massive explosion lit up the displays. One of the Nexrathi hunters had apparently panicked, its crystalline form shattering under the stress of fighting its own instincts. The explosion took out 2 of its companions. "Their fear of us is actually making them more dangerous," General Chen observed. "They can't think clearly enough to fight effectively, but they're too desperate to stop." Marina watched as human defenders, severely outgunned, somehow managed to predict and counter the Nexrathi's increasingly erratic attacks. The colonists were displaying reaction times and tactical insights that should have been impossible. "It's not just them evolving," she whispered. "We're changing too." She quickly connected her tablet to the quantum scanning network. The data confirmed her suspicion. Human consciousness patterns were becoming even more complex under stress, developing new layers of chaos that made them harder to track. "We're not just invisible anymore," she announced. "Under threat, our quantum signatures are actively disrupting their hunting patterns. Every time they try to focus on us, our consciousness patterns scatter their targeting systems." Another Nexrathi hunter self-destructed, its crystalline form unable to handle the cognitive dissonance of attacking what its deepest instincts told it to fear. The remaining hunters pulled back, regrouping at the edge of the system. "We need to end this before they get truly desperate," General Chen said. "If they're being driven here by something worse, then we need to help them," Marina finished. "Not fight them. They're not our real enemy. They're just the first wave of refugees fleeing the Great Hunter." The general stared at her. "You want us to help the species that just attacked 3 of our colonies. I want us to survive what's coming," Marina replied. "The Nexrathi are apex predators, and they're running scared. Whatever drove them to attack us despite their terror, it's getting closer." New alerts flashed across the displays. More distortions were appearing at the galaxy's edge, larger than any previously recorded. The shadow predators were coming in waves now, whole swarms of them fleeing toward populated space. Marina looked at the quantum scans again, at the impossible complexity of human consciousness patterns under stress. "We evolved to hide from the greatest predator in the galaxy," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time we learn to help others hide too. Because if we don't, there won't be anything left for the Great Hunter to find except empty space and broken worlds." The quantum sanctuary wasn't much to look at, just a repurposed mining asteroid hollowed out to house 10,000 Nexrathi refugees. But to Marina, it represented something unprecedented. Predator and prey working together to survive. She stood in the observation deck, watching crystalline forms drift through the specially designed chambers. Their movements were still nervous, instinctive fear warring with the need for shelter. Behind her, the quantum displays showed the void growing at the galaxy's edge, a darkness that consumed everything in its path. "The latest test results are in," Raj said, joining her at the window. "You were right. Human consciousness patterns aren't just hiding us anymore. They're spreading the effect." Marina nodded, reviewing the data on her tablet. The human researchers working with the Nexrathi refugees were unconsciously projecting their quantum camouflage, creating zones of safety where the crystalline beings could hide from detection. "It's like our ancestors developed something beyond mere survival," she mused. "We didn't just learn to hide. We learned to bend quantum space itself." An alert flashed across her display. Another group of shadow predators had been detected, fleeing toward populated space. But this time, something was different. "They're not running randomly anymore," she realized, studying their trajectory. "They're heading straight for the sanctuary. They can sense the void we're creating." The sanctuary's defensive systems activated automatically as the shadow predators approached. Marina watched, fascinated, as the nightmarish entities that had once terrorized the galaxy now huddled against the asteroid's quantum-shielded hull, seeking protection. "Dr. Torres." A technician's panicked voice came through her communicator. "We're detecting massive distortions. Something's following the shadow predators." The void between stars began to twist. Not the usual ripples they'd observed before, but a deliberate warping of space-time. Something vast was pushing through, drawing everything toward it like a cosmic drain. "Get me General Chen," Marina ordered, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Tell her it's time to test the resonance theory." As she worked, she felt it, a pressure building inside her mind. Around her, other human researchers were experiencing the same sensation. Their consciousness patterns were shifting, evolving in real-time response to the threat. The general's hologram appeared beside her. "The fleet's in position, Doctor. Are you sure about this?" Marina wasn't sure about anything anymore. The theory was barely tested. The idea that humans could actively project their quantum camouflage, creating safe zones in space where nothing could be detected. But they were out of options. "Begin the resonance," she ordered. Across the sanctuary, human researchers focused their thoughts, guided by newly installed quantum amplifiers. Marina felt the pressure in her mind build to a crescendo as their consciousness patterns synchronized. Space itself seemed to shudder. Where before there had been individual voids in the quantum field, now there was a massive zone of absolute emptiness. The sanctuary, the refugees, even the approaching shadow predators, all vanished from quantum detection. Through the observation window, Marina watched as the thing pursuing the shadow predators arrived. It defied comprehension. A vast, shifting mass that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The great hunter had finally revealed itself. But it couldn't see them. The creature paused, its impossible form distorting space as it searched for its prey. Marina held her breath, feeling the strain as every human in the sanctuary maintained their collective quantum void. After what felt like eternities, the hunter moved on, pursuing phantom traces toward the galactic core. "It worked," Raj whispered, breaking the tension. "We didn't just hide ourselves. We hid everything." Marina stared at the quantum readings, still trying to process what they'd achieved. Humanity hadn't evolved the ultimate camouflage by accident. They'd evolved the ability to protect others, to create spaces where even the most terrifying predators could find refuge. "Send word to Earth," she said quietly. "Tell them we need to build more sanctuaries. The great hunter isn't going to stop searching, and we're the only ones who can offer shelter from the dark." Beyond the sanctuary shields, space began to normalize. But the pressure in Marina's mind remained. A reminder that humanity's greatest evolutionary achievement wasn't learning to hide. It was learning to help others survive. 6 months after the first quantum sanctuary went online, Marina stood before the Galactic Council again. The chamber was different now. Representatives of the Nexrathi, and even several groups of shadow predators, attended alongside the traditional members, all of them united by a common need for survival. The Great Hunter continues to search the galaxy's core systems, she began, bringing up the latest surveillance data. But our network of sanctuaries is holding. In the past month alone, we've sheltered over 2 million refugees from a dozen different species. The displays showed the current map of protected space, vast bubbles of quantum emptiness where nothing could be detected, all centered around human populations. What had started as a desperate experiment had become their greatest achievement. But that's not why I called this session, Marina continued. We've finally completed our analysis of the Great Hunter's quantum signature, and she paused, still wrestling with the implications. We found something unexpected. The chamber grew silent as she brought up the comparative scans. They showed 3 patterns: the chaotic void of human consciousness, the twisted signatures of the shadow predators, and the vast, consuming emptiness of the Great Hunter. They're all connected, she explained, not by genetics or descent, but by an evolutionary arms race that's been running for millions of years. The Great Hunter evolved to detect and consume normal quantum signatures. The shadow predators evolved to emit distorted signatures that were harder to track. And Earth's life forms, we evolved to emit no detectable signature at all. Murmurs filled the chamber as the implications sank in. Marina pressed on. But here's what we missed. It's not about predator and prey. It's about adaptation. Each species developed more sophisticated quantum patterns, forcing the others to evolve in response. We weren't running from the shadows. We were part of their evolution, just as they were part of ours. She brought up new data, showing how human consciousness patterns had continued to develop since the sanctuaries began operating. We're still evolving. Every time we extend our quantum void to protect others, our patterns become more complex. We're not just hiding anymore. We're actively reshaping quantum space. The Nexrathi representative's hologram flickered. You're saying we're all connected? That our species' fear of humans was part of the same evolutionary cycle? Marina nodded. Your ancestors recognized our quantum signature because it represented the next stage of evolution. Not better predators or better prey, but something entirely new. A species that could bend quantum space itself. She showed the final piece of evidence, readings from the Great Hunter's latest pass through protected space. It's changing too. Each time it fails to find us, its hunting patterns evolve. But not toward better detection. Toward something else. The displays showed the hunter's quantum signature gradually shifting, becoming more like the void humanity had created. It's not hunting anymore, Marina explained. It's adapting. Just like the shadow predators adapted, just like Earth's life adapted. The cycle continues. Around the chamber, representatives of former predator and prey species alike watched as their shared evolutionary story unfolded. Marina felt the familiar pressure in her mind, the quantum void expanding, protecting them all. We didn't evolve to hide from the universe's greatest predator, she concluded. We evolved to help break a cycle of endless hunting. Our ability to create these sanctuaries isn't just about survival. It's about offering a different path. One where predator and prey can stop running, stop hunting, and start evolving towards something new. She looked around the chamber, at species that had spent millions of years locked in evolutionary arms races, now working together in humanity's quantum sanctuaries. The Great Hunter isn't our enemy. It's just the latest participant in an endless cycle of adaptation. And together, we might finally have found a way to end that cycle. As if in response to her words, the quantum sensors lit up with new readings. The hunter's signature was changing faster now, its vast form beginning to resonate with the void humanity had created. Marina smiled. Evolution hadn't turned humanity into the ultimate prey or the ultimate predator. It had turned them into something far more important. The species that could help the galaxy's greatest hunters finally stop hunting. The void between stars grew a little quieter, as predator and prey alike learned to simply be.